Welcome to another Unmuted with Marsha. Thank you for joining us. You know, when you turn on the TV, you are seeing these anti-Israel, pro-Palestine, pro-Hamas protests and encampments that are all over our college campuses. And these campuses are really at the heart and the center of what we see happening with this pro-Palestine, pro-Hamas movement, and the universities that allow this anti-Semitism on the campuses are, well, I got to tell you, they just ought to be defunded because of what they are allowing to take place and not get their arms around what is taking place on these campuses. Now, Senator Tim Scott and I and some other senators have offered the Stop Anti-Semitism on College Campuses Act, and it would defund these schools. It would allow them to divest from federal funds and not use taxpayer dollars at those campuses. Now, Senator Cotton has legislation, the No Bailouts for Campus Criminals Act. I have joined him on that bill. It would prevent any pro-Hamas protester on college campuses that is convicted of a crime from having their student loans forgiven. Now, our guest today, Julio Rosas, has been reporting on the ground from these college campuses, and he has just brought some great insights to bear on what's going on. He's a reporter at The Blaze. He has been covering the protest at UCLA and UC San Diego. He is a Marine, he is an author, and he has written extensively about the 2020 BLM protest. And Julio, I think you've been out at George Washington as they are going through some things today. So let's start there. You've been reporting extensively on this. So tell us what you're hearing and what you're seeing.
Well, I mean, you put it correct that, this is more than just being a pro-Palestine movement. This is also pro-Hamas. It's an anti-American movement. It's very similar to the sentiments that I saw when I was on the ground covering all the different BLM and Antifa riots. And really what we've seen since April is a real activation of those same networks that caused chaos almost 4 years ago now. And so it's something that I've been warning for some time because I covered the first major, anti-Israel protest in New York City on October 8th last year, and I could feel the energy coming back that it has been kind of lacking since the end of the riots in 2020. But because it was in the middle of fall, going into the winter, it does kind of depress turnout and depress kind of the direct actions. So that's why it's no surprise that once it finally got warmer consistently across the country, people were willing to do these encampments because, right, no one wants to camp out in New York City in January. They want to do that in April. So it is very concerning just because obviously some of these encampments have gone beyond just sitting on the quad. They violently have taken over buildings, threatening staff and not just students. So, it remains to be seen kind of what will happen once the school year is finally done, nationwide. But I think that, should these encampments no longer have kind of the population that they are experiencing now, people will just go home and continue this sort of direct action wherever their hometown is.
Got it. Now, we are hearing and have read some reports about the funding that is going to some of these groups like Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine and Students for Liberation of Palestine. And then there's been reports that some of these donors are Soros and the Open Society Foundation, Bill Gates Foundation, the Rockefellers, Governor Pritzker's family and their foundation. What are you hearing about the funding and the training that is being given these students?
Yeah, it's like I said, the reactivation into pouring resources and personnel into this current movement is very real. I mean, yes, they people do have these different groups because a lot of colleges have Justice in Palestine chapters, and they use their social media, they use their phones to fundraise. Oftentimes, whenever we see a sweep like we saw at San Diego or UCLA or UC Chicago. Quite often, we will see their social media pages advertising for people to donate to the bail fund. And we've actually seen that has been pretty effective because often we've seen another post saying, "Thank you to everyone who's donated. We've reached our goal for this bail fund." So that's just one example. But yeah, I mean, people are receiving resources and funding precisely for this moment. And I think that this didn't happen overnight. I mean, they have been preparing for this type of action for a few months now, right? So it's a matter of kind of waiting and seeing, what's going to happen in the summer, because obviously colleges are not that busy during the summer, and maybe the pressure is not going to be so much on the administration. They're not going to feel that since commencement will be over. But like I said, I mean, for example, the DNC in Chicago, there's going to be a ton of organization. I mean, they're organizing right now. They had a whole conference in Chicago a couple of weeks ago, explaining what they're going to do and how they're going to do it to disrupt the DNC. And the fact that
Yeah,
Democrats in
Julio,
Chicago.
and who paid for the conference? Do you know?
I'm unaware exactly of who, but it is the same kind of dark far left money coalition that
Got
helped
it.
put on the funds. And I'll say that I mean it's hard for college students to come up with all these resources, right? I mean that's one of the
Yeah.
stereotypes, generally speaking, right? But so in UCLA, one of the reasons why they were able to hold off police for so long is because they had so many improvised shields and materials that when police breached the walls the students and non-students they put their bodies in a tight formation and whenever an officer ripped a shield from a protester or an occupier they were able to bring up another one because people kept bringing the shields up forward to the front of the line and it just was an endless stream of these like barricades and shields. It was very fascinating. So they were ready for that. And so it is a real problem, I would say. And of course, whenever it comes to dark money, people have certainly are right to have questions about that. Of like, well, how is this being allowed to happen?
Yes, one of the things that has interested me, many of these groups and organizations have been so pro having open borders, whether it's our southern or our northern border. They have opposed the Border Patrol's request to build a physical barrier. And what is the first thing they do when they set up these encampments? They build a wall and then try to keep the authorities out. Let me ask you this, because I know you covered a lot and have written quite a bit about the BLM protest and 2020. What are the similarities and where do you find commonalities in the training or the funding or the building of these organizations with the 2020 protest and the protests taking place today? You said you felt like you were witnessing the energy come back into that.
Yes, so the rhetoric alone is almost exact. You just have to replace a
Got
few
it.
words and so for example, I mean they complain about the same things, right? They complain about white supremacy, colonialism, fascism, kind of all of that. And so they view the United States, both of these groups as the enemy, as they need to take drastic action to completely revolutionize the United States as we know it, change it to their worldview so that in order to atone for past sins, quote unquote. And so that is one of the most like kind of stark things that you'll see because oftentimes, obviously, whenever the police are involved, as they have been involved recently with clearing away the encampments, it quickly starts. The chance that they have quickly don't necessarily talk about Israel, but they start talking, F-12 and all cops are B word and all of that. So they believe that they have a lot of common ground, and through that kind of extremist worldview, they do, and so that's why there is a lot of that overlap. And as I said at the beginning, that's why that same kind of network, that overall network, from the funding to the social media to the actual people on the ground, are often the same people that are the kind of the ringleaders that we saw almost 4 years ago.
Julio, where can our audience keep up with your reporting on this? Where do they find you on social media?
So I am now the national correspondent for the Blaze, so theblaze.com over here at Blaze Media and also Blaze TV. But I also have my own Substack, mostly peaceful.live, where I'll be still be posting content and all my all my notes and travels, because I suspect that I'll be quite busy this summer, and we'll see what happens with the election, because that can be kind of another thing that can spark, unfortunately that can spark another wave of who knows what. But so that's where people can go find my reporting.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And as always, our unmuted audience will find me on social media at Marsha Blackburn.